Hi everyone! So I was invited to participate in an online rapid tournament called ChessPunks Champs. And as part of that, chess.com is giving me access to a coach in preparation for that tournament on October 22nd. So that is our guest today. It is FIDE Master Midas Ratsma. He is a chessable author and a very experienced coach. We will be going over one of the games that I played in a over-the-board tournament just a couple days ago. I hope you enjoy and learn as much as I did.
Yes, exactly. We are gonna have a look at the game, and you were playing this game with the white pieces, and you went here for the London setup, a very solid opening. But after c5, you decided to immediately grab that pawn. Were you familiar with this option of
Yeah,
taking?
so it's something I've been trying out a little bit more, mostly in like online games, just to kind of mix it up a little bit and get out of like sort of the mainline stuff that I don't necessarily always enjoy.
Mhm.
It and of course I don't know it super well, so it maybe wasn't the best choice to play against like the top player at this tournament. But you know, it gets some interesting positions, I think, and I think it kind of gets me out of my comfort zone too.
Yes, it surely got some interesting positions. Your opponent plays e6, immediately attacking that pawn, and now you defended it. And now black plays a very good move, a typical move in these positions, a5. So once your opponent captures a pawn, you would like to win it back. This pawn here on c5 can become a bit vulnerable. So black will start attacking it, and you defend the pawn, and there is a trade here. Your opponent now brings out the bishop first, and now you start developing your knight to f3. At this point, your opponent can choose to play b6 like he did in the game and attack your pawn here. Your opponent can also attack the pawn on b4 with a development move. How could they do that?
Yes, with knight c6.
Yes, with knight c6. Yeah, at this point, would you still have a way to safeguard that b4 pawn?
Well, I can't guard it with a3 because that pawn can't actually capture, because if I captured, then the rook on a8 would be able to take my rook. Um,
Yes,
I
yes,
think I can
exactly. And
maybe
this is
guard with the queen, but I don't know if that's fantastic.
so this is an important point that once you put the pawn on a3, then there is a pin here on this pawn, and the knight could capture on b4, and now you can't capture back because the rook will drop. So that's why, yeah, defending with the queen would be better. What would be the downside of advancing the pawn in this case?
Well, I guess it attacks the knight, but it also just immediately undefends the c pawn, and those pawns are just kind of getting. They're getting a little too far away for my liking, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to hold on to them for very long if I just keep pushing them up the board.
Yes, yes, exactly. That can be a big issue. Where do you think Black would move the knight in this case?
I mean, they could go back to b8. I don't know if that's a great move, but
Mhm.
or I guess like b4 or a5. Okay, I just said all the moves they can make.
Yes, yes. Which one do you like most? Back or to a5 or to b4?
I guess I don't know. I feel like I'm not sure how they defend it if they go to like b4. So
Mhm.
I guess a5 is probably best just because it's immediately defended by the rook.
Yes, and you don't want to go backwards. Like going backwards is very passive. Here on a5, you're defended by the rook, and also, okay, depending on how your opponent plays, you would have potential to possibly at a later stage jump to b3 or to c4. At this point, that's not possible yet because the queen is covering b3, but the a pawn is still in a pin. So in case this queen ever moves forward, let's say, then the knight can come to b3 and attack the rook. Um, yes. So now the c5 pawn would be very vulnerable. Yeah, queen b3. is another option to protect the b4 pawn. And in these positions, black has one typical idea because one diagonal has been quite weakened. And when black now plays a move like knight e4, what would black be preparing for?
I guess the diagonal I'm thinking that is weak is the a1 to h8 one. So maybe like fianchettoing the bishop on g7.
hmm Yeah, so this diagonal is indeed very weak. Bringing the bishop there with g6, bishop g7 would like trap the rook almost. But there is a faster way uh, to try and trap the rook.
Oh, just with queen f6.
Yes.
And then I
And
can't block with the knight because the knight is already there.
this would be very dangerous if the queen would come out and try to catch that rook immediately.
I see.
Yeah, so you have to watch out for that. That's also why at this point, instead of developing the knight, um, you would usually like to prepare to build a pawn chain with like pawns on a3, a3, b4, and c5, because the pawns here are quite strong. But now the issue was that after knight f3, knight c6, you cannot defend because your rook is still unprotected. So what development move could you make at this point to make sure your rook will also be protected?
I'm thinking like maybe moving the b knight out to d2 or to c3.
Mhm. Yes, exactly. Which one of the two squares would you choose? D2 or C3?
I think d2 is more typical, or it seems a little bit more in line with what I usually would play. Because I mean, first of all, it's just like defended, and it's not in line on that weak diagonal, so I don't really have to worry about defending that as well as the rook.
Yes, exactly. This is a safer option. And the problem with placing the knight on c3 could be that, let's say your opponent would ever challenge your pawns and you would capture them. When this bishop takes here, you would immediately run into an annoying pin.
Yeah.
So you would rather avoid that. Yeah, so if you play knight e2, now the difference is that after knight c6, what defensive move do you have now to build that strong pawn chain?
Oh, so now a3 would actually work because the queen's defending the rook.
Yes, and now these pawns, they are strong. Yeah, black doesn't have that tactic anymore. So with knight e2, you very nicely also protect your rook. And the key to playing safe and good chess is making sure that always your pieces are defended. So with knight e2, you make your position more secure by defending that rook. So here, yeah, your opponent actually didn't play knight c6, but attacked with b6. Also a very logical move. Black is aiming to break down these pawns over here. So you just developed and you decided, okay, I will give back that pawn. I will also develop the bishop and just get a safe position where you castle. In the end, you'll have this a pawn, which could be a little bit weaker than black's central pawns, but for now it doesn't seem too worrying. So you push that pawn forward, brought the knight out to the center. Yeah, why did you play this move, knight e5?
Well, black was threatening to push e5 with the pawn, and then push my bishop back and then fork the other minor pieces. So I was like, well, I probably just shouldn't go backwards. It's usually better to go forwards. And putting a knight on that square usually in the London is also just pretty typical.
Yes, that was definitely necessary jump because, as you pointed out, when you would castle, yeah, e5 hits your bishop, gains the tempo, attacks here, bishop drops back, and then you indeed have this fork, and yeah, that's a bit problematic. So you jump forward. Now you castle, you keep your knight on a beautiful square. There is trade. bishop to d6. And here I like how you played. So you played a knight f3, and you didn't immediately trade the bishops. Why did you choose to play knight f3 instead of, let's say, trading the bishops?
I guess there are a couple of reasons. Like I felt like my knight wasn't doing too much on d2, and I guess I'd just rather like trade on my own terms is kind of a way I like to think of it. Further developing the knight onto a better square seems better than just like mindlessly trading off a bishop for no reason other than the fact that black offered it. So I want to get my knight to a better square, and if black wants to help me do that, then great.
Yes, yes, yes. And this way, you're restricting black's possibilities to build a strong center. So if you would trade the bishops, yeah, what move could black go for next to make their center stronger?
Just pushing e5 probably.
Yes. But now you keep controlling that square. So that looks good. So the rook came out here. What was your opponent planning to do at this stage?
I figured they wanted to double rooks on the a file and try and just go after that weak a pawn. So I wanted to just
Yeah.
prevent that at all costs because I had a feeling that a pawn was gonna fall and I wanted to put it off as long as possible.
So that's why you kick the rook with the bishop. The rook also dropped back. You started attacking again, and now the bishop blocked. Okay. So at this point, what was your plan for the coming moves?
Well, I think I eventually wanted to protect the a pawn with my light squared bishop, probably either by going to bishop c2 or to b5. But I
Mhm.
felt like I needed to prepare that move, which is why I played the queen move out. But if they had captured my bishop on d4, I wanted to recapture with the knight, probably. Yeah, other than that, I did not really have a plan. I was just kind of desperately holding on to the a pawn.
Mhm. Yes, yes, yes. And a passed pawn could as well be a strength or a weakness. What would you have to do to make your pawn a strength?
Well, I would have to get pretty close to promotion and also not
Mhm.
be attacked by so many pieces, which at this point
Yeah.
it's a little bit tricky to even push it up just one square because like I just don't have the pieces over there at the moment to defend it.
Okay, but which pieces from black are attacking your pawn now?
I guess just the rook on a7, but I was still imagining them to want to double the rooks on the a file, and I guess
Yeah,
I
but the
just
bishop
wasn't.
is attacking as
Oh,
well.
and the bishop, yeah.
So you're now under attack twice. Um, and at this point, on which square on the A file is your pawn the safest?
Maybe like a6 would be nice.
Mhm. Yes, yes. So at this point, your pawn is twice defended, twice attacked. If you push it one square forward, it's just as safe, right? Because it's once defended, once attacked. But if you push to a6, then also your bishop starts defending. So pushing the pawn forward is now a strong way to get closer to that promotion, but also to use your light squared bishop to safeguard the pawn. So this would have been quite strong to start pushing that pawn.
Mm.
So now your opponent was trying to increase the pressure. So you defended with your bishop. That's a logical move. There was a trade, and the knight came into e4. And now you need to watch out for some tactics. Um, what tactic does your opponent want to go for on the next move?
So I saw they're looking at knight d2 with the fork on the queen and the rook. And then what I
Mhm.
realized after I defended against that is they were also threatening to go to c5, which attacks the queen and then also attacks the a pawn.
Okay, so you defended by going with the rook to d1. Is going with the rook to d1 the only way to defend against the fork, or are there more ways to do that?
I could have also just like
Yeah.
moved one of those pieces out of the way so that when the knight jump there, it would not have been a fork, but I think I would rather just prevent them from going there in the first place.
Yeah, but if you move one of the pieces away, then the knight e2 move is no longer so dangerous. So wait, you suggested to move queen to d3, right?
Hmm.
You said you don't love to move yet. Yeah, what would you expect your opponent to play at this point?
I guess that still gives them the c5 square to jump and also attack the a pawn, which is maybe what I should have been equally worried about.
Yeah, so they could attack the a pawn. Could you, in this case, still hold on to the pawn?
Maybe with queen c2.
Okay, queen c2. Yeah, so let's have a look at this point. How many pieces from black are attacking that a pawn?
Um, I guess three or well maybe four with the bishop. I guess I don't know if that really counts.
Yeah, so let's count for now just the knights and the rooks. Yeah, the question is, does the bishop also count? So if, let's say, knight takes a4 will be played now, does it win the pawn for black?
um, yes, it does because yeah, the bishop x-rays through my bishop.
Yes. So how does the variation continue after knight takes a4?
So say knight takes a4, bishop takes a4. Black can play bishop takes a4. And
Mm-hmm.
then yeah, I can't take with the rook because I'm just losing a rook.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. Okay, so you're now looking at this variation. Do you have the possibility to attack back with a fork at this point?
Well, the move I'm looking at is knight c6, but I don't think that works because I
Mm-hmm.
just lose a knight.
Okay,
Uh,
why would you lose a knight?
because okay, after knight c6, I can't take back the knight because then rook takes a1.
Can you please repeat the variation? Knight c6? What
Knight
does
c6.
black play?
If bishop takes c6.
Yes. Then you can't take back. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But what else can you take at that point apart from the bishop?
Oh, I guess I can just take the rook on a7.
Yeah, but then when black takes back and when you take the bishop, how would you evaluate the position in the end?
Still down a pawn in that position.
Yeah, so this wouldn't work well. This wouldn't work well, unfortunately. Yeah, but at this point, you wouldn't immediately have to capture the knight with the bishop. You also have more options available. In this case, you would have a move where you can trade one of black's defenders. How can you trade off black's bishop?
Just by taking on d7.
Yes, yes. You can trade off by taking on d7, but the downside is that also you trade off your attacker as well. And the queen will now also be defending the knight in the end. So the knight is quite secure. You also have a fork at this point where you force black to trade off the bishop.
Oh, with knight c6.
Yes. And then what should black play?
So bishop takes on c6, and then I take the bishop with my bishop on c6.
Mhm. Yes. And what are you attacking after bishop takes c6?
Oh, the rook on a8.
Yes, yes. So now you're attacking the rook on a8, but now you also have three attackers on this knight. Mhm.
Okay.
So do you think black would still have a way to strike back in this position?
I guess I'm remembering now. I kind of was looking at something like this. I don't know if it was in this exact position, but I was thinking they could play rook c8 and pin the bishop to my queen.
Yes, rook c8 would pin the bishop. What would you play after rook c8?
But yeah, then I guess I could just take on a4 with my rook. And then if rook takes back, I could take with the queen.
Yes. So at this point, the bishop is in a pin. And as you mentioned, if the rook takes, the queen takes back, and then the bishop is no longer in the pin, white will stay a piece up. But now black still has a pin on the bishop. Uh, can black play also any other move to try and make use of this pin?
Maybe rook c7. Just
Yeah,
adding another attacker.
which one?
Oh,
Which rook to
rook a c7.
Rook a c7. Yes. Is black now threatening to take back the bishop?
Yes.
Can you add more defenders with white?
I could play rook a6, I guess.
Yes. Can black also add more attackers?
Maybe with queen d6.
Yes, with queen d6. Okay. Can you add even more defenders?
I guess with rook c1.
Yes. It's a funny position actually, because all the pieces on the board are actually either attacking the pin piece or supporting the pin piece.
Yeah.
And in a position like this, you would always want to untangle from the pin, and if you untangle from the pin, you're doing very well. Sometimes you can also try to immediately go out of the pin already. If you move your bishop away, well, your queen starts being under attack, but also you will start attacking your opponent's queen with a rook. So what would happen if you move your bishop now? Where could you move your bishop to?
Maybe b7 to attack the rook on c8.
Yes. And you're also attacking the queen.
The queen.
Yeah. Okay, let's take some time in this position to think about how the game will continue. What I recommend when you have a chaotic position like this is to always start for either side by looking at the most valuable captures, and then calculate until the end, until you can clearly evaluate the position. After that, you can always start looking at the second most valuable capture. So what variations are coming to mind now?
Okay, so I'm thinking if rook takes my queen on c2, then my rook can capture the queen on d6, and the rook can win my bishop back after that.
Which rook?
Or wait, no, it can't because it captured my queen.
Yes, exactly. So that would be good for white. White would stay the bishop up. Yes. So what will happen if the queen captures the rook on a6 now?
Okay. Could I capture the rook on c7, maybe?
Okay, and what would white play there? Sorry, what would black play there?
Oh, I guess then they could play queen takes f1, capturing my other rook, and then I'm forced to take, and then they can capture my queen, and then it's a bishop versus a rook.
Yes, good calculation here. Yes. So that's unfortunate. In this position, black realizes that they will lose the queen either way. If they capture your queen, they will lose their queen. So they do a Desperado. It's a tactic where they agree that they are losing their queen either way. So why not capture this rook for it, give a check, and then take back the queen, and now black is suddenly up in the endgame. So this wouldn't work out well. What move would be better here for white?
I guess the other one that comes to mind is just taking the queen with the bishop on a6, but then it's the same thing where I'm just down in exchange.
Are we? How does it continue after that?
Oh, wait. Okay. I'm calculating one move further. So okay, if bishop takes on a6 and then rook takes on c2, and then the bishop can swing back and take on c8. And then I guess the rook can capture the bishop, but then I guess I'm still a pawn down, but it's fine.
Yes,
Other than
you're
that.
still pawn down. And compared to this position, you wouldn't be happy with it, right? Because you have basically lost the bishop. So you shouldn't play the bishop to b7 and get out of the pin in this way.
Yeah.
One thing that's always beautiful is that in chess, when you look at a certain variation and it doesn't work, it can still give you a clue about what the strongest move will be in a position. Because now bishop b7 didn't work because when the queen took here and your queen took there, now black still had this Desperado move before they took back your queen. Is there another square where you can move away to with the bishop now, where you try to avoid this Desperado idea from your opponent?
b5 with the bishop?
Yeah. So on b5, you would be blocking that diagonal for the queen. Yes. And what would happen now?
Okay, so if queen takes a6 and then queen takes c7, this just definitely seems better than before.
yes. Exactly. So at this point now, it looks quite similar to the previous variation, except your bishop is on b5 now, and then you block this Desperado queen sacrifice. So when the queen takes the bishop, you take, and it will lead to checkmate. Yeah, and when the rook takes, you just take back, and you stay up at the bishop. But this is a more comfortable advantage than you had before, because remember that when you were defending with the rook, you were still stuck in this annoying pin, and it was really troublesome how to get the bishop to save the effort. Yes, and at this point, what happens if the opponent immediately captures your queen?
Then I can just take the queen on d6.
Yes. Okay, so I will try another move for black. Queen b4 would still attack that bishop, but also your queen would still be under attack. So how would you deal with this one?
I might consider like queen a4. Well, I guess I don't know if I necessarily want to offer the queen trade since I'm down a pawn, but that's one way to defend.
But you're up a bishop, right? So
oh yeah, I'm up a bishop. That helps.
Offering a queen trade should be good. So queen a4 should be perfectly fine. For me, also another move would come to mind. I would always like to consider captures first. So what can you consider as well?
Oh, I can maybe just take on c7, and then if the rook takes back, I can go rook a8 and force the opponent to give up their queen on f8 to block the mate.
Yes, exactly. So in that way, you're trading off a lot of material, and you're kind of simplifying the position to an endgame where you have to be less afraid of your opponent's counter chances. Yeah, so that would be very good. Yeah, so let's also go back a little bit to to the position in the game. We were at this point, we are looking at knight takes a4. And then we saw that the move knight c6 is actually very strong for white. But at this point, and at any point, I would always recommend to first look at capturing the most valuable pieces, because now black had these three attackers on the a4 pawn. White had these three defenders. Can black eliminate one of the defenders from white?
Yeah, just by taking the pawn or the bishop on b5.
Yes. How would you have to take back?
With the knight, because the a pawn is pinned.
Yes. And what would black be able to play then?
And then they can just capture the pawn on a4.
So this would be a much better way to play it for black than to immediately take that a4 pawn. Black can first trade the bishops. So that's why the move queen d3 is actually not the best because it runs into this knight c5. In the game, you played rook fd1, and now you got into some trouble after the bishop captured you.
Yeah, I thought I was being creative here. I don't think it really worked out very well for me. I was debating between capturing here with the queen or with the knight, and I
Mhm.
calculated that after capturing with the queen that that black could fork me with the knight to c3, but then I could also fork black with my knight on c6, and then that's kind of where my calculation ended.
It's an interesting position at that point. Yeah, so you calculated to take back with the queen. Yeah, what do you think that would happen if you would take back with the knight?
The knight could then jump to c5, I guess.
Yes, and this would be a strong move, forking the queen and the pawn. Yeah, after your queen would move away, um, would black be ready to win the a4 pawn now?
I think so.
Yeah, so you also didn't have an alternative where you would keep the pawn alive. And actually, at this point where you played the rook to d1, it went it went a bit wrong because you could also have placed your rook on another square where you anticipate this knight c5 jump that attacks both your queen and the a4 pawn. Where could you also have gone with your rook?
I guess rook c1.
Yes. And if you go to c1, the position is a lot safer because once your opponent captures here, yeah, you are also, for example, ready to capture back. But now, what would happen if your opponent still goes for knight c5?
Oh, so then I can play queen b4 because it's attacking the knight twice. So then after that series of captures, it like I could just take the knight theoretically.
Yeah, it's actually still complicated because can you calculate that series of captures?
Okay, so the black rook takes a4. If my rook takes a4, um, I guess I was calculating if rook takes a4, I can capture the knight on c5
Mhm.
with my queen,
Yes. And then
and
how
then
does it continue?
oh, I see the problem. So yeah, if
Mhm.
then queen takes c5, I can't actually take back with the rook because then I get back rank mated.
Yes. 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 Oh, that's quite unfortunate. Yes. Yes.
Yikes.
Um, so, but at this point, are you forced to take back with the knight, or can you also take back in another way?
I guess with the queen here.
Mhm. Yes, and then you defend against this knight c5 tactic. Yeah, the problem was that this didn't work in the game. This is actually also how the game went, but now there was this fork, and that was problematic. Yeah, now knight c6 came, and your opponent immediately captured the queen. But let's have another look also for black. What are the options here for black?
He could have moved the queen, and then I still would have been, or my queen still would have been under attack. I guess I don't know where exactly they would move the queen.
Yeah, there are a lot of squares available. Yeah. Usually, if you think about where to move, you you would always like to attack more if possible. So, what could the queen also attack?
I guess queen d7.
So, queen d7 would add another attacker to that knight. Yeah. So now your queen, rook, and knight would be under attack. Yeah. What would you do about it?
Um, Probably resign. um,
So,
I would. Well, I guess I'm thinking just like queen c5. But then the rook comes in and pins the knight, and they're winning the knight, or they can just take. Or wait, no. Okay, hold on. I need to actually
Um,
calculate concretely.
so let's go a little bit slower. So you said queen c5. Okay, so you said okay, the queen is the most valuable piece that's under attack. I would like to move it. Right? So queen c5. Now, to have a first idea of how the position will work out, it's always good to consider all the most valuable captures from either side. So after queen c5, what is the most valuable capture black would go for?
Knight takes d1.
Yeah, and then what is the most valuable capture you can go for?
I can go knight takes a7.
Yes. Okay. What is now the most valuable capture black can go for?
Rook takes a7.
Rook takes a7, yes. Or queen takes a7 is also possible.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Let's have a look at rook takes a7 first. Then what's your most valuable capture there?
Rook takes d1.
Yeah, you should take on d1. Okay, can your opponent still capture something there?
They can take the pawn on a4
Yeah, how can they take it?
with the. I guess with either piece, the queen or the rook, if the rook is on a7. I was thinking rook takes.
Um, but they cannot take it with either piece, actually. With one piece would be quite problematic.
Yeah, okay, they can't take with the queen because then it's the back rank checkmate. There's a lot of those in this game.
Yes. It always comes back the back rank checkmate. Yeah. So they can take with the rook, and then in the end you're pawn down. So we looked at this: queen c5, take, and take. Yeah, if the queen would capture, then queen c8, and it would be another back rank checkmate. Yeah, so you would be a pawn down. So definitely not necessary to resign yet, right?
Yeah, I guess.
It's only a pawn down. Yeah, never resign too early. That's very important. Yeah, so actually, would black also have a good alternative about where to move the queen? So with the move queen d7, you were able to go to c5. Can they also avoid that you go to the c5 square?
Maybe just staying on the dark squares, so like queen d6.
Yes. Okay, so now again your queen, rook, and knight are under attack. What would you do about this time?
The move that comes to mind, I guess, is like queen b3. Or wait, no, then I lose my knight. Wait, no, I don't. Hold on. I always do this where I think too far ahead and I'm not actually calculating the actual concrete lines. That is definitely a weakness of mine.
Yes, when there is a line, it's always good not to make a conclusion too fast. Especially if it can make the difference between being a piece down or having an equal position. Yeah, you should take some time to calculate it. So queen b3, yeah. Are you losing the knight or not?
Right. I'm thinking if the queen takes the knight right away, I can't also take their knight on c3 because the queen is now there protecting it, but I could maybe go rook c1, but then they could maybe go rook c7 or just add another attacker down that file.
Okay, so after rook c1, you're pinning that knight, but your opponent has a very strong tactic to get out of the pin.
Okay, so my queen is on b3, my rook is on c1, their queen is to capture my knight on c6.
And it's black to move. Yes.
And black to move. Just the knight check on e2.
Yes. And that's a very strong way to get out of the pin because you fork the king and the rook, and next move, the rook will also be gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, so unfortunately this doesn't work, so you do indeed lose the knight. Does your queen have any square where it could still protect the knight?
Like queen b6? which I don't
Yeah.
love because it kind of walks into that pin.
I fully agree with you. So now the big problem is that compared to the variation we saw before, after queen d7, queen c5, when black captured the rook, you could still capture their rook.
Right.
And then it wouldn't be great, but you would still survive to an endgame only pawn down. In this case, after queen d6, queen b6, yeah, if they capture your rook, you can't capture their rook because it's pinned.
Right.
Yeah, even when you capture back the knight, black would have a tactic to even win more material. What could black play here?
Rook c7.
I think this move, rook c7, possibly could also work. It's not what I had in mind. Yeah, now you target that knight more often. Can white still defend it more?
Maybe with rook c1.
Yes. Can you still attack it more?
With rook c8.
Yes. And unfortunately, you cannot go out of the pin with the same check because how will I capture your knight now?
Think with the queen.
Yes, and they still have this one sufficiently protected. Yeah, so this would also work. What I had in mind was a skewer on the queen and knight. How could you go for that?
Oh, with rook to a6.
Yes. So this one immediately
Yeah, that makes a little bit more sense.
immediately wins the knight. Yeah, both would win the knight actually. Yeah, so queen d6 would have been a very strong move by your opponent.
Yeah, that's brutal.
I would say probably the best you can do to minimize the losses is sacrifice your queen. How can you sacrifice your queen and get back as much material as possible?
Maybe with knight takes a7, and then
Yeah, and
when
then when
the
knight
knight
takes
takes,
e5.
I can recapture the knight.
Yes. But this should still be very good for black. Black has the queen against the knight and rook. And now they played a good move because they were not immediately capturing back your knight because then you could take their knight as well, and it would be a balanced rook endgame. But instead, they played king f8, relying on the fact that your pawn is still pinned. And here, yeah, you basically lost that pawn, and now you had to defend the position of pawn down. Okay, rook b1. Are you ready to take the knight on the next move?
No, because of
Not
back rank.
Not yet. There's still the back rank. Okay, so your pawn played g6 also, but you now finally secured the back rank, both of you. Okay, so here you were jumping with the rook. You were moving your pawns a bit forward. Okay. Yeah, did you have a plan at this point to defend this endgame?
I knew it probably wasn't going to happen because my opponent was very strong and would obviously see this, but I thought if I could get a pawn on g5, and if my opponent gave me a few moves, I could go knight e7 and threaten the mate with rook g8 because the pawn would be defending. But I mean, obviously my opponent prevented that, but that was kind of the plan with pushing the pawns.
Yes. That would be a beautiful mate with the pawn here, knight here. You would have this king trapped, and then rook g8 would give the checkmate. Yeah. So your pawn becomes with g5. Maybe they could even have played knight e4 when they are also attacking here and covering that g5 square as well. Okay, so yeah, this knight also came in, so you push forward the pawn. That's logical. And here, okay, you got your rook off to the 7th rank. That looks strong. And there was a trade of rooks. And here, yeah, your knight was under attack. And the king walked back. I think that now the position maybe looks a bit better than it did before. So So in this position, it's 4 against 3. You would love that probably all the pawns would be traded, and that you make it roll. In such an endgame, yeah, you could in the end, if your opponent, let's say, would have one pawn and knight, and you would still have the knight, you could sacrifice your knight for the last pawn, and with the king and knight, your opponent won't be able to checkmate.
Right.
So in these type of positions, it's very strong to aim to trade as many pawns as possible, and then sacrifice your knight for the last pawn. Which strategy can you use here to try and start trading the pawns?
Looking at it now, maybe like h4 would have been good to prepare g5 and sort of trade on the g file.
Mhm.
Yeah, I guess just with the aim of trading off as many pawns as possible. I don't know if the passers down the center of the board are going to be a problem in that position, but maybe since my king is close enough, it's a little better.
Okay, so then you would go for h4 and maybe after g5. Yeah, do you think that that black can avoid that you play g5 and that all the pawns will be traded?
Maybe with knight f7.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the knight f7. Is there also a more active square where the knight could cover g5?
Oh, knight e4.
Yeah, knight e4. Mhm. Yes, yes. Yeah, about pawn structure. A pawn structure is better when pawns are connected to each other, when they are all defending each other. So your pawns here, they together form one pawn island, one connected group of pawns, and your opponent pawns, they form two different islands. If your opponent's pawns are split, it will be difficult for them to keep their pawns protected. It will be more difficult for them to go forward with their pawns. So, which pawn from black would you love to trade the most?
Maybe the h pawn,
Okay,
or
so
oh, maybe not.
if you
Maybe
would
actually
trade
one of the passers.
if you would trade the H pawn, they would only have one pawn island left, right? So all their pawns would
Yeah,
still be connected.
I see what you mean.
Um,
Okay, so maybe like the d pawn or the e pawn would be better.
Yeah, actually, if you would trade off this e pawn, then all the other pawns would be split. So this would be one pawn island, one pawn island, one pawn island. So this e pawn is their most important pawn because it can defend in both directions. It can defend the f pawn and the d pawn. King d4 would be a strong plan to try and trade the e pawn next. What could you now play if you could move one more time?
Maybe f5.
Yes, f5 is very strong because then you're getting ready to trade that e pawn. But if the e pawn captures you or moves forward, then you can also go and take that d pawn. And imagine, I will just play a slow move for black. You would play this, take. Okay, now you would also be attacking that knight. But now, in the end of the day, like after capture, maybe you wouldn't be able to capture that knight because the pawn would capture here. But imagine the position would be something like this. Now it would be quite manageable to try and stop the pawns and in the end maybe trade one pawn for another pawn, sacrifice a knight for the last pawn, and that way you could try and fight for the draw. But it's a very complex end game, and yeah, in the end, your opponent now got two connected passed pawns and slowly started marching them forward. You were still trying to fight back with your G pawn, but it's really difficult to stop those passed pawns. At this point, almost impossible. So you're going up and down a bit. In the end, yeah, your opponent captured this G pawn, and uh, now the position was winning for your opponent.
Yeah.
Here, here you were still attacking that pawn, but with a check, your opponent takes control, gives a fork, and then yeah, unfortunately you lost the game in the end. But it was a very interesting fighting game where you definitely had good chances to hold the game.
Those are some really interesting variations, and I do appreciate just like the simplicity of this early you pointing out this early a pawn push because I sort of considered it, but I think it's just like a very like psychological fear based thing of like I don't want to push my pawn too far where I can't defend it off in no man's land. But I think it's just good to like keep these different plans in mind, and same with the pawn plans in the end game, just trying to separate the pawn islands. I think that's really helpful and maybe not something I ever necessarily considered. I obviously am just not quite as experienced in those kind of end games, but I think I knew the general plan of like trying to trade down and then sacking my knight for the final pawn, but I just didn't go about it maybe quite in the most fighting way. So all of those were really good, and then of course the tactical stuff in this position was just, I mean, just beautiful.